Welcome to the Workflow Show. This is episode 301, the beginning of our third year and third season. Today, I, Nick Gold, and my colleague Jason Whetstone of Chesapeake Systems are joined by two people we've known for many years. This is Visitations from Quantum episode. The quantum reality here at the Workflow Show in Chesapeake Systems. We are joined by Alex Grossman and Skip Levens. We have a storied history with these two. We've known them for quite a while, done lots with them over the years and in multiple incarnations. And guys, to be honest, I can't even really remember your job titles at a given moment. Maybe you can just start off by telling us what your current roles at Quantum are. I almost think of you as an inseparable duo, right? It's like, Alex, let's start with you. What do you do these days at Quantum?
Sounds good, Nick. And Nick and Jason, great to be here with you guys, and always a pleasure. So currently at Quantum, I manage the media and entertainment business. So essentially, product, go-to-market, all the information about satisfying our customers, ensuring that we have the right products, the right strategies for support and service, and just generally understanding the needs of the media and entertainment customers. And that covers both post and broadcast and a lot of the sub-vertical markets such as, sports and a lot of the news and other publication pieces that we work with.
So the media grand poobah, in other words.
Yeah, well, that's a good way to put it. I like that. But I would say just someone who has been around the business for a while and understands it to a certain extent.
And Skip, what's your title currently at Quantum?
So thanks for having us on, and I got to say congratulations on embarking on your third year of the Workflow Show.
Yeah,
thank you.
In 60 years, I'll be like hitting myself, I'll be like,
well, then we'll get to do the roast for you guys, and that will be a lot of fun.
We almost make it too easy to roast us.
But Skip Levens, and I drive what's called technical marketing for StoreNext at Quantum, and I am a minor minion on Alex's Grand Poobah team.
Yeah, right.
No, but the reality is, given our background and what we've done, and I pretty much love to get involved in almost anything related to StoreNext and how people are using it, and whether there's customers in, let's say, federal or life sciences, or media and entertainment, of course, how they use tools like StoreNext to do collaboratively something that they couldn't do any other way. So
yeah.
That's the heart of it, and that's what I love to do.
Tell us how you guys got into this this whole sort of media IT kind of space.
Wow, where do we start there? I guess for myself, it really started. I've been a storage guy for a lot of years, and I was initially in what do we call this now? We used to call it publishing, but I don't even know what it's called anymore. Nothing is in the printed page anymore. But yeah, I started in the printing industry, and of course I was very excited. I was an electrical engineer. That was what I was degreed in, and a minor in CS. And I thought, well, this is a really interesting market. This publishing thing is just happening so fast. This desktop publishing thing that was happening was changing the world. And I realized that, guess what? Things like Photoshop are going to increase the amount of storage that people use. So, hey, maybe I should start working on storage. And that was in the 80s, if you can believe that, and when people had big hair and incredible dress. But that really got me into the business.
Nice.
Cool.
And what about you, Skip? What about the early days of your entree into this space that you've been regretting ever since?
Well, I gotta say, I was a marketeer and a brander, but we bought these magical black Unix workstations from a little company called Next.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And at one point, the company I was working for was the largest customer of Next workstations, and I got to tell you, I completely fell in love with Next Step and object-oriented programming and web objects. I just clearly, to me, that was the future. And from there, I leapt to Apple to go drive, believe it or not, in macOS 8.6 days, how they went and built web apps and served web apps on Mac 8.6, if you can believe it.
I still argue that 8.6 is the best pre-OS 10 operating system those guys ever had.
Rock solid.
I remember
yeah.
when I went to college, I remember anybody who was kind of a geeky, a professor, or even some of the, guys that worked at the college, they all had 3 boxes in front of them. There was always a Windows box, a Mac, and a Next. So yeah, it's definitely.
They were the one college that had Next boxes. No, it was a very and for our listeners who don't know this, I mean, you ought to if you're a geek listening to this program. But Next, of course, was the company that Steve Jobs ran after he was kicked out of Apple the first time, and then started, and they developed this wonderful Unix. BSD with a mock kernel operating system that at the time was known as NextStep, that became OpenStep when they ran it on multiple processor platforms that Apple then bought through Next when they also absorbed Steve Jobs back into the mix as iCEO for a while. And it became the OS X operating system that we love and use and worship today. And I have to say, I recently built a Windows box to play with my new Oculus Rift virtual reality headset, and
nice.
It's been cool, but I have to say, gosh, Mac OS really is the best from a client perspective. And speaking of Apple, I mean, I think that's where Chesapeake's original relationship with both of you guys in some ways was formed when we were one of the, I'd say, leading edge Apple video VARs, 10 years ago even. Maybe you can tell us both about your activities there. It's obviously an exciting company, a sexy company. We all have our new iPhone 6s, or at least I do, that we love and worship.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it was a little bit of an ordeal getting it, but, it was worth it.
I definitely put you in the early adopter camp. That's well done.
I think he's more of a fanboy, but we'll just.
It's both of those things. They're both true.
Yeah.
So fanboy adopter. I love it.
Exactly. Alex, why don't you start off? I mean, we met you when you were doing a lot with the servers and RAID group at Apple. Can you tell us a little bit more about that time there and what you were trying to build there?
Sure. It's kind of an interesting time, and it's an interesting story because it's really relevant to where things are today. I mean, I was a huge fan of Apple for a long time, and don't get me wrong, I ran a group at a former company that basically did everything for Windows and for Linux and for Unix, but I always used the Mac, and I love the Mac, and it was one of my first computers, and like you, I probably had a shirt that said I love Multi-Finder or something in the good old days. But I went to I knew everybody at Apple because at a company that I was managing at the time called Micronet Technology, we were a big OEM to Apple. We did about 25% of their storage, and so we were one of the largest storage vendors they had. And I had a little conversation with Mr. Jobs and of course Phil Schiller and John Rubinstein at the time. We were talking about Apple and storage, and they said, hey, Apple's an interesting company, but we don't have a storage practice, and we used to do servers, and we don't do servers anymore. How'd you like to come over here and start that up? And I thought, wow, Apple is this big company, and I can go ahead and start a storage practice, bring a great team in, and do something incredible. And that's how we got started. And from there, it was interesting because in my former life before that, I was working with what we had called desktop video with companies like Media 100 and Radius with Video Vision. And Apple had just acquired what became Final Cut Pro. And so we had the opportunity to not only just do the server and storage business around, as Skip said, there was a lot of things to do even today, federal and life sciences and many places that Apple was incredibly successful, including universities, but also in video production, and all the way from post to broadcast, and really working with the Final Cut team to bring server storage and, of course, this great file system that we call Xan, the collaborative engine that put it all together. And I was privileged enough to work with a fantastic team and to be able to build those products and really drive it in the image of what we wanted to see going forward, and working with some of the smartest people in the industry. I did that for about 7.5 years, and it was a great run. we did a lot of great things.
Skip, what
And of course, that's where I met Skip.
yeah, and so Skip, what role were you in over there? I mean, it's
Well,
an interesting background.
Yeah, so I got to tell you, so I was on the developer relations team at Apple, and I was brought in on the Xserve launch and immediately just had this vision of the future and just how far that Apple could take servers and storage and how that could help support the Pro Apps ecosystem. And I was absolutely sold. I lobbied internally and became the technology evangelist for servers and storage and OS 10 server, which meant that I got to, I mean, for me, it was absolute tech heaven because I could work on great teams that Alex was putting together. I don't think we can describe it in any detail, but Apple does something pretty magical called the Apple New Product Process. And it's this wonderful collaborative way to recruit kind of the best of the best around the entire company and go build products in ways that obviously result in groundbreaking products. And so I got a chance to see that up close and be on the teams that Alex was putting together. And it really felt like it was moving history. It was doing, Apple had always had servers. It's just it was a Mac G3 tower called a server. And kind of as an object lesson, I saved an old Shiner tower from recycling and stuck it in my office because that was what Apple used to call a server. That was actually running Apple UX back in the day. So to me, it was a chance to write history and the kinds of things that Apple was doing in servers and storage and in support of the Pro Apps was just completely groundbreaking to me, and so that's how I got involved and got to be a part of it.
And this is where I met you when Apple was evangelizing this platform very heavily. They did these events for us reseller partners called Rack and Roll, and I think this is the first time I was out in Cupertino at Apple HQ and met you guys and was just very impressed by the vision. And interestingly, in the same kind of stretch of time that I think you guys were involved with that team, really aimed at the rack of the customer space, right? There was this other set of developments happening at Apple that were very focused on what was going on inside of people's pockets and what platform they might be sitting on their lap or in front of them on their desk. And from an outside perspective, both as a consumer and as an Apple partner, it seems to me that the weight of Apple's interests in that time period very much started to gravitate towards that client end experience and less of that server side. Mm-hmm. Is there anything you can speak to kind of then as a segue about your next big push with the server and storage space, which was again our next level of engagement with you at Active, just about what was going on at Apple at that time and then kind of your genesis into Active Storage?
Well, it's an interesting point in history there, Nick, and it really brings into what the power of, if you want to call it the IT piece of the business was. So we were the experts in what we'll call the server and storage or IT business at Apple, and Apple had had their own internal IT, and let's face it, they were running a multi-billion-dollar company, and there were things like Oracle and SAP and all these great things. But when it came time to have to serve out audio and video and to have it in a collaborative manner, and actually remember when the quote-unquote iTunes music store came out, there wasn't a formula for people to actually take all these pieces of media coming in on tape and physical. They were coming in on CDs from a lot of the vendors, and there was no standard. A studio would have a movie in this format or in that format. Who knows what codec it was stored in, if it was digital, but most of the time it was on tape. A lot of the audio was coming in carded up, and we had to figure out how to actually build a system that could accommodate what we thought would be hundreds of thousands of downloads, which became billions of downloads. And we got right in the middle of that, and that's one of the reasons why we got a lot of attention within Apple, because as you say, there was a serious shift going on to helping the consumer. And I think Steve Jobs made a statement at one of the keynotes where he said Apple is a mobile company. And a lot of people who were doing the Mac Pro at the time got a little scared, and all of us server and storage people were thinking, what does this mean? But we had a lot of attention. But the one thing we could see is while Apple wasn't going to abandon the market, we saw that we were going to tail off. And what we saw is that we weren't going to go after the market as hard as we'd done for the first 5 years. So just to give you a little background on this that's kind of interesting is that there were many, many server and storage companies that were established for many, many years, and they were doing really well. And Apple became, for a period of time, the fourth largest storage vendor in the world. They're largest in the US. And we had come from zero to that in 3 years. And so we really had a lot going on. But the opportunity loss piece was, where does Apple spend the money? And so we wanted to take it to the next level. We wanted to evolve beyond that. And we saw some changes that were happening in the industry. And what we saw is that the Apple ease of use, the whole ease of everything, was becoming more important. And it was not only on the consumer side, but also on the server and storage side. And you guys know that before the Xserve RAID, you had to have a degree to basically get a RAID system up and running and manage it remotely with crazy tools, and nothing was integrated.
Yep.
And so we fixed that at Apple, but we could only do it to a certain extent, and we had our hands tied as to where we could go, because you had to live up to a certain Apple standard, which meant that you had to work on, and I hate to say it this way, but it's true, you had to work on the idea that you couldn't move faster than some of your brethren in other areas. So your cadence was a slower cadence. So we decided, a few of us who had been at Apple and a few of us who had been at the company before I was at Apple, we all got together and we decided we're going to spin ourselves out and do a little venture called Active Storage. And we really, Steve Jobs used to say, would you like to put a dent in the universe? And we put a little dent in the universe, and we focused particularly on the idea that we were going to take storage for media and entertainment, storage for the creative side of the house, the creative professional, to the next level. And we went out and we got that patent portfolio up very large. And of course, the first thing we did is we OEM StoreNext from Quantum. Mm-hmm. And the reason we did that is we felt it was absolutely the best collaborative sharing engine on the planet. And we knew it pretty well because of our ties with Xan. And we decided that we could change the way StoreNext was used. And we optimized performance around it. We built things like Active SAN. And that was also, a 5.5-year great run at being able to change the world a little bit.
Well, very few organizations at all who made technology for anything even approaching, again, the rack or the IT side of the shop, I think ever really even thought, what is the user experience of this platform for the people administrating it, right? It's like,
absolutely.
Skip, tell us about what went into that thinking. Like, why was that important? Especially, why was that important in the media, entertainment, broadcast space? That creative side of the IT shop.
Well, so this is really interesting, and I think Active Storage was really an answer to the question that you often have when you're starting a company, and which is, how far can I take this? What do you stand for, and what do we want to do? And as Alex said, it was really to make a dent in the universe. And for me, it's always been about what people do with the tools you create. If you create great tools, what else can customers do with it? And it was really, if anything, kind of, some people might challenge the notion that you would make storage that you could set up in 4 clicks with software tool that automatically discovers its environment and automatically makes good decisions or good default decisions. Mm-hmm. And people thought, well, gee, you're taking away from the integrators, and the integrators want to show that value to the customer. And we took the complete opposite stance. We said, if you make tools that are intuitive and easy to use, and make smart decisions and use intelligent defaults, that the chore of installing those for those creative professionals becomes a very small part of their business, and you can then focus on what else you provide to the customer, being consultative and helping them realize their vision. And Chesapeake really got that. I mean, that's why it was so much fun working with you guys, is because you saw that vision and you responded to it. and that was what made it so exciting.
Yeah, I mean, as much as we can all geek out on storage, at the end of the day, no matter what's going on in that rack, it's a hard drive icon on your desktop, right? I mean, it's not exactly the sexiest thing in the universe.
Well, that's what it should be anyway.
Exactly, and you shouldn't have to dwell on that.
Go away. Right. The theory is it should just go away. It should be completely seamless and invisible. And that was the whole idea. Make hard technology easy. And that was the goal. And I don't think anyone's gotten to that level since Active, although I would say that we've been doing some things at Quantum that are just pretty cool.
Cool. So we started off this whole discussion talking about how you guys are really a part of the media and entertainment part of Quantum, and why should there even be a media and entertainment part of Quantum? I mean, like what are the what are some of the unique challenges that we face in that space?
I think that's a really interesting question, Jason, because I think where we see it and where it's always been is that we like to say that storage is horizontal, and we like to say that anything you do in a work group, anything you actually have done where you're doing collaboration, it tends to be a horizontal thing. We all collaborate every day on email. We do it on Skype. We talk quite a bit. We do it in chat, and we share files and we share photos, and we have a lot of tools to do this. But ultimately, when you're working with very large files, streaming files under heavy deadlines, the horizontal tools that people use, these storage devices that people have, they just fall down in media and entertainment. And people say to me all the time, how can that be? How can a big, large, 3-letter company not be able to do what you could do in your smaller company, in your much more focused company? How can you do it better than they can? And the answer is that and this is why there is a media and entertainment practice, is that we're looking at different things. So, you guys know this, but obviously a lot of your audience probably doesn't, is that when you look at the way we deliver storage, the way we deliver performance, it's different when you're in a enterprise environment working with a mail server and trying to help an ATM machine work versus what you do in media and entertainment. And it comes down to these two terms, one called IOPS and the other called throughput, and I would add latency in there. And so there's really a different type of system required and a different type of performance specification required in order to be good at media and entertainment. And while we all know in the business there are heavy demands and deadlines, sometimes you just can't do it over. And that's really what the difference is. You have to capture it correctly, you have to get it done in post, and you have to get it out there. And it's a fairly complex business, and it's exciting. And probably the reason I'm so excited about it still after many years is that it's constantly evolving. And evolution, believe it or not, should make it easier, but it actually makes it harder. It makes it more complex.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we're in media entertainment.
Right.
So in thinking back to Exxon and how it was really kind of mind-blowing how easy it was for two people to see and share the same storage, that was a huge step forward. But and as wonderful as Exxon is, it feels like the pace of change and the demands being placed on content creatives has gone up exponentially. And the pace of change has quickened so much that you have to have a really deep technology tool chest to draw on to try and meet these challenges. I mean, things that were just never conceived of 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Almost every creative team now has to not only create packages for TV or movie, they are evolving into these constant production factories that have to produce assets in different flavors for, some of our customers, 40 different platforms.
Sure. And even in this space, this media and entertainment space, you have a lot of different types of workflows. You have like a news workflow, and you have a sports workflow, and you have a post-production workflow. So that's definitely challenging. File sizes, that you're talking in the media and entertainment space. Single files can be gigabytes, sometimes terabytes. It's really something. And You mentioned about how the pace of change. We're starting to talk about 4K, 5K workflows now. Everything's just getting bigger. As we're like, as consumers crave like higher quality, and they're asking for this. So
Absolutely.
It's really funny because the complexity and the change is all driven by consumer demand. So we talk about our life at Apple, and in some ways, Apple's professional business was hurt by the consumer business, or at least a lot of people have that perception. But in reality, iTunes changed the way people's delivery would be forever. And even though early on they didn't do a lot of streaming, and you could say Netflix, maybe a couple others really drove streaming, Hulu and others, really the way you delivered content, the number of different formats you delivered, and who delivered the content really has been changing. So it's not just, when we say media entertainment, it's a little bit of a misnomer, because it's not just professional organizations that do sports and news and their post facilities and broadcast facilities, but a lot of this is still corporate America doing this, corporate video around the world, enterprise level companies getting into this, ad agencies. I mean, today we're just inundated by the amount of content that people are demanding anywhere, anytime, on any device at the highest possible quality there is. I mean, what was I seeing the other day? Was it Kindle said that we're twice the resolution of HD, and then Samsung came out and said, oh no, all our displays on our new devices going forward are 4K. I mean, really, do I really need 4K on a cell phone? I'm not sure. But ultimately, it's going to drive these workflows where we're going to put a higher demand on the way we deliver and how fast we deliver, which is really crazy.
Yeah, and what's happened is that, video was, because of the cost of producing it, the cost of these storage systems at a time when there were millions of dollars to put in a SAN versus, tens of thousands of dollars. There was only an elite that could produce it, and it was a one-to-many type operation where it was a mass communications medium. And I think that evolution that you were just describing is that it's become a communications medium for everyone. I say it's become the language of the internet. The universal language of the internet is video now. Something doesn't seem right if it's lacking video. You don't go to any websites anymore that don't have video as a pretty integral part of it. Even if you're a startup with your Kickstarter, what has fueled so many Kickstarters for these things that are just ideas, frankly, in someone's head? They've had a really snappy video that makes it seem really compelling, and so that power really is in everyone's hands now. So with all that said, that changing landscape, the higher demands, and yet the ability for more and more people to participate in telling those stories through that medium, whether they're a traditional broadcaster or media operation or a corporate entity or a nonprofit utilizing video to tell their story. How specifically is Quantum now responding, right? You're in this new space. You're in Quantum, which became your home, the source of the intellectual property of StoreNext. That seemed a very logical transition for you guys and a number of your colleagues that were part of Active's organization to land when that organization ceased to exist. And you now have this large entity, this corporate entity that has a lot of resources behind it. What is Quantum now doing in the face of this rapidly changing landscape as far as the product line, developments, just ongoing activities, the way you're wrapping things into packages? Maybe you can spend a few minutes, just clarifying for the viewers, what they can look to in Quantum to see that Quantum is a partner to work with to respond to this world we're now inhabiting.
That's a big question, Nick, and I would preface any answer by saying that the heart of it is still StoreNext. And it really is. I have fun reminding people that letting people work on the same problem, the same storage at the same time, is one of the hardest computer problems there is. And StoreNext does it and has done it elegantly for a long time. And it allows you, as opposed to a NAS, it allows you to use to the unique needs, to address the unique needs of video customers, where you've got very, very, very large files that are very sensitive to any kind of latency. They don't take well to packetizing, et cetera. That's always been the strong point for StoreNext. And one of the major initiatives that Quantum recently completed was a complete, call it a retooling, a re-architecting of StoreNext itself. So every component of the StoreNext file system got a major overhaul and tune-up, and all with an eye towards modernization and making it ready for whatever the future brings.
So that's StoreNext 5. Maybe you guys can go into a few of the killer bullet points that makes it exciting, and maybe relate that in a way that might be exciting to the end users, right? Because me, as a guy who's been very involved with storage for many years, it's like when I started to see the bullet points and the presentation from the always very engaging Alex Grossman about its feature set, I'm like smiling like a little kid, right? I'm like, oh, it's Christmas and whenever, right? But what does that manifest as? So maybe you guys can go into some of those details and like, what does it mean for that user in that challenging environment? What is StoreNext 5 doing that's unique?
Yeah, it's interesting, Nick, you mentioned that because, we get all excited too, right? The StoreNext 5 is essentially a wish list that, Skip and I and others, especially people within Quantum, put together over a number of years. And we started, that wish list back at Apple. So yeah, it's a wish list of things that are just modernizing it, because as much as we talk about this, as much as Skip relates how things are changing, things are still the same. And the same means that people want a piece of software. They want StoreNext just to get out of the way. They just want things to work. Like you say, at the end of the day, it's an icon on your desktop, and ultimately you just want to click on it and see all your content. But in the world of media professionals today, they don't usually do that. So we're Mac people. We think of the Finder. Go to the Finder and find your content. Really, it's all about, and the number one bullet point of StoreNext 5 is the connectivity to the ecosystem. And that's really the key to me. So when I say ecosystem, I mean all those partners that build all the applications that we use every day. So, whether it's Final Cut Pro 10, or whether it's Adobe Premiere and the whole Creative Suite, and especially Adobe Anywhere, or even whether it's Media Composer and using tools like SandFusion, we can add that right onto StoreNext 5. And so working with a lot of third-party companies to build out this ecosystem where everything feels seamless at a level of performance where you don't know the content or that data is not on your computer. And that's what StoreNext 5 really brings. So the way to look at it is, in a modern world, we took StoreNext 5, we made it understand that there were multi-process architectures, there were multiple threads that we could do, there was a lot of memory, we could make the performance faster and better, but ultimately to the user, it just feels like it's always there and always reliable. And Skip talked about this. There's been this war of SAN and NAS, if no one knows what that is.
Sure.
Essentially, it's just the different way that you hook it up. And the NAS guys get faster and they catch up. And then, the resolutions get bigger and the files get bigger and the NAS guys slow down. And ultimately, the SAN guys, where StoreNext mainly plays, the idea that you're just connected all at once, this performance level, just continues to increase. And what StoreNext 5 really does is it just makes working with large media, whether today it's audio or video or any type of video, and whether you're doing technologies like transcoding to change formats, or using proxies, or working raw, the thing that StoreNext 5 does is just makes it all feel natural. So there's no slowdowns in performance. When you click on that quote-unquote Finder and want your content and want to play it, it's there. When you want to record it, it's there. So all the way from ingest to play out, it's just fast and easy. And the key to me is you don't work like that anymore. Today, you work either in the application or you work with a media asset manager, and it has to have an inherent knowledge of where the content lives on the network. And the network may not even be in your building. The network might be in the cloud, or it might be in another facility where you're connected. Mm-hmm. And what StoreNext 5 does is it gives you the ability to have a more worldwide view of where your content and where your assets will be, and also to make those content and assets available with no slowdown in performance. But that's really the beauty of StoreNext 5.
That's
We
great.
could go through
Yeah.
all the hot technical stuff, but that's the beauty, right?
Well, tell us a little bit about Storage Manager now. We talk about Storage Manager a lot. What exactly is Storage Manager?
Well, that's a great one. Let me jump in, Skip, real quick on that one because I think Storage Manager is mainly misunderstood, and it's for the reason that it's been around for a long time, and now it's finally really valuable. What do I mean by that? What Storage Manager is a policy-based engine that allows you to control where your content lives at any given time. So let me say that one of the big evolutions that's happened in the media industry is what I like to call remonetization. So people have content, this is the way it works, right? You take your assets, you build it into content, you deliver that content, the show's done, you wash your hands of it, and it goes away, right? No, it doesn't. Because let's face it, it used to be like that when things went to air and you watched that TV show and you had to be home on time to make sure that 8 o'clock at night, you're in prime time, your TV show was there. And then came the DVR where you could actually record it in case you weren't there. And now you have these things called on demand. And so now you can watch it in on demand. And you watch a television show, and it runs for 7 years and it goes off the air. And what happens? Well, people want to watch it again. I mean, I'll use Breaking Bad as my great example. There are more people, and I just stole this off the internet. There are more people discovering Breaking Bad now because it's been such an award winner than watched it initially. And
Yeah.
so, pulling that content back, where is it? Well, 7 or so seasons of Breaking Bad. I can't keep that all in my primary main online disk. It had to go off to somewhere to be saved. And, in the old days, we didn't save it, right? What do? Nick will tell you.
Yep.
We used to take the hard drives, unplug them, put them on the shelf, or, write it out to videotape and hope it was there in 5 or 6 years. And now what we do is we realize there are different stages of storage. There's this online stage. There's an extended online where I may want to keep it for 5 or 10 years. And then there's this deep archive where I probably want to put it on something more resilient, an object storage, which, that's another technology, or tape.
Yeah,
and
we'll get to that in a little bit.
Yeah, and the beauty of that is that the idea that you can actually use Storage Manager to set those policies to say, and Storage Manager also works with other tools like media asset managers and production workflow managers, where you can actually say, hey, I'm done with this show. I want to save it for a longer period of time, move it off my expensive online storage onto a less expensive storage, and one that may be more resilient. And hey, by the way, make a copy of it and put it on tape so I can take it off site, the quote unquote salt mine, get it out of the way. So God forbid there's an earthquake, California guy talking, right? There's an earthquake or a flood or anything else that could happen that would be a disaster, a fire, God forbid, something like that. You want to be able to maintain that. And we all know in this business, because the data was so big, people didn't follow those good practices. There's many movies and television shows right now that the quality is just so poor because they didn't have the originals to go back to. I mean, we could point to them, or the big fire at Universal, where some of those, great shows have been lost forever. And we want to maintain that. So Storage Manager has come around because the need has come around for it. And the beauty is it's seamless in StoreNext, relatively easy to set up considering how difficult it is, and it's just something that's well supported by the whole ecosystem. So and I was mentioning this ecosystem of third-party vendors, if they work with StoreNext, they instantly get connectivity to Storage Manager and other quantum tools. That is the beauty of having what we like to call an end-to-end workflow.
So,
Make sense?
Alex, it sure does. It really does. So just give me a really brief, how does this all work? So Storage Manager, what I'm picturing is, you get done with something and, you have, maybe your volume A, which is your really expensive high-speed storage, with all the space. And then you have your volume B over here, and that's your, slower disk or whatever. Is Storage Manager just kind of moving that file, and then if I check tomorrow, it's not going to be there anymore?
It's actually magic. The guy from Chesapeake just comes in, sets it up, and it just all works. But really, yeah.
To the end user, what does it end up looking like?
To the end user, you can set policies, and there's two ways to really do this. One is you can use Storage Manager native, and you can say, and there's these things called affinities in StoreNext 5 that are the coolest things in the world if you want to geek out and throw the throw the really spinny hat on. But without that, the key is really like this. So if I know that I'm finished with a show, I'm finished with any of my content, I can tell Storage Manager, here's what I want to do. I want to move it off this piece of storage, move it to this piece of storage, and move it to tape. The end user will happen overnight. It'll happen when there's free time. It'll happen when there's no load on the system, and it can all be adjusted. And for the user, they'll just see it move away, but it'll leave an indicator we call a stub, so that they can get, if they want to get it back, they can click on it, and it will bring it back from either tape or other discs so that they can use it. In fact, depending on what the other disc is, the extended online disc, it may be instantly available, or it may take some time. For instance, if it's moved out to tape, it'll say you have to load this tape in order to get it back. If the tape is sitting in a tape library where there's a robot, and not one of those scary ones, but a robot that moves the tape back in, it'll just automatically bring it in as it's required. And a lot of times, in the media world especially, people use these things called media asset managers. They see all these pieces as assets and they manage them. And so to the user, they may not even go into the Finder. They may go to the job area and say, I want this job. And again, the beauty of this too is as our resolutions go up and the needs go up, and the more people who are actually collaborating on this content, your online storage costs go way up, because now, as you say, these files can be terabyte files. And if you have 100 of them, you need 100 terabytes online.
And the thing
and
we like,
that's per week,
yeah, and the
right?
thing we like as an integrator, and you know, we actually do know the answer to a lot of these questions. Jason here is being a little leading, right? You know, we love the fact we love the fact that, you know, things like Storage Manager have their own set of APIs, right? So to our listeners, these are called application programming interfaces, but think of them as hooks into the back end of the software that an integrator like ourselves can leverage in order to kind of create back-channel communication, if you will, between various pieces of, say, enterprise-class software. And so, you know, when we work with media asset management systems, you know, they have these two identities, right? A database, essentially, for searchability of the content, and tagging with metadata and all of those types of things. But then they also serve as these automation and workflow engines. And so one of the things that's really cool about Storage Manager is that it gives us these APIs that we can hook a media asset manager right into. So these two pieces of software, the MAM and the engine that's driving the flow of files across multiple tiers of storage, they're all in constant intrinsic communication with one another. Essentially, you've taken two systems and really turned them into one. And you kind of stop looking at each of their own sets of capabilities as kind of silos of where they impact your workflow, but you've created an entire integrated workflow from the top down that has multiple packages and software things talking to one another. And because StoreNext and its Storage Manager component are really so intrinsic, right? They're foundational. It is the file system, but it's also this abstraction for where files are across either multiple file systems or multiple storage technologies altogether. We can have the MAM, you know, the house on top, you know, built squarely on the foundation in a way that, you know, it's frankly a unique level of integration possibility when we use Quantum's, you know, technologies to that level. We work with some other vendors who do archive software as well, but it's not as firmly planted, right? It's the level of integration and the possibilities, the scalability that allows for really doesn't touch what we can do with
StoreNext
and Storage Manager.
I mean, it's what comparing what this can do to a NAS. Alex was mentioning that earlier. It's really pretty amazing.